Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I grown up hearing about how university was the golden ticket to success. Get a degree, they said. Open doors, they promised. Well, I went to a prestigious university, worked my backside off for years, and graduated with what everyone considered a good result. But here's what nobody tells you. That golden ticket comes with an £83,000 price tag and no guarantee of anything. My sister took a different path. She didn't go to university. Instead, she went straight into work after school, built up experience, and actually started earning money while I was drowning in student debt and essays. We're close, my sister and I. We don't judge each other's choices, we support each other. That's just how it's always been. The trouble started with family. My grandmother had been admitted to hospital, nothing too serious, but enough that we wanted to visit. My sister and I made the trip down to see her, and we were staying at her house while she was away. It was supposed to be a quiet few days, just us checking in on the house and spending time at the hospital. Then my aunt showed up. We don't see her often, maybe once or twice a year if we're unlucky. She lives in London, works some high-powered job in the city, earns what she considers to be a fortune, and has made it her life's mission to remind everyone that she went to university. No husband, no kids, just her career and her degree, and her endless opinions about how everyone else should live their lives. The first evening she arrived, my sister and I had a bet going. We do this every time we know we're going to see her. I guessed it would take 20 minutes before she brought up the university topic. My sister thought she'd only last 15 minutes because she looked like she had something on her mind. I ended up being closer to the truth. It took exactly 18 minutes. We were sitting in my grandmother's living room, cups of tea going cold, on the coffee table. My aunt had been talking about her journey down, the traffic, her important meeting she'd had to reschedule. Then she turned to my sister with that look, that sympathetic, slightly condescending look that made my blood pressure spike. She asked my sister what she was up to these days with work. My sister handled it gracefully. She explained her current job, the responsibilities she had, the project she was working on. She actually sounded quite proud of what she was doing, and she should have been. She was good at her job, earned decent money, and was building a solid career. But that wasn't enough for my aunt. She told my sister that was nice, but then asked if she'd ever thought about going to university. She pointed at me, mentioning how I went to a really prestigious university and got a wonderful degree. She said my sister could do the same thing and get something so much better than what she was doing now. I watched my sister's face. She was still smiling, but I could see the tension around her eyes. We'd heard this speech 100 times before. University is the best thing since sliced bread. Everyone should go. You're wasting your potential. On and on and on. My aunt went on about how university opened so many doors for her and how she wouldn't be where she was today without her degree. She said my sister was still young enough to apply and could really make something of herself. That last line did it. Make something of herself. My sister had already made something of herself. Having a job, paying her bills, and living her life wasn't enough because she didn't have a fancy piece of paper to frame on her wall. I'd had enough. Years of listening to this nonsense. Years of watching my sister politely nod and smile while our aunt dismissed everything she'd accomplished. Years of pretending that my expensive degree had been worth it. I was done. I told her that at least my sister had a job. My aunt blinked at me, clearly not expecting me to speak up. She started to say something about how my sister obviously had a job, but I cut her off. I told her it took me over a year to get one, after graduating. Over a year. I asked her if she knew what that was like, sending out hundreds of applications, going to interviews, being told you're overqualified or underexperienced or just not what they're looking for. Then I asked if she wanted to know what my job actually was. She didn't answer, she just stared at me. I explained that it wasn't even a graduate job. The only reason I got this job was because I started working as a temp. They needed someone to answer phones and file paperwork, and eventually they kept me on. My university degree, my prestigious university degree, was completely useless. and I was 83,000 pounds in debt for it. The silence that followed was beautiful. My aunt's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She looked like someone had just told her that water wasn't wet or that the sky wasn't blue. Her entire worldview was crumbling right there in my grandmother's living room. She tried to argue that surely the degree helped me get something, but I wasn't having it. I told her it didn't help me get anything except debt. I pointed out that she went to university decades ago when it actually meant something, when fees were a fraction of what they are now, when having a degree made you stand out. I explained that now everyone has one and they're worthless. The paper they're printed on is worth more than the qualification itself. My sister was trying very hard not to laugh. I could see her biting the inside of her cheek, her shoulders shaking slightly. I finished by telling my aunt that maybe she should stop telling my sister she needs to waste 3 years of her life and tens of thousands of pounds on something that won't help her. I said my sister was doing fine without it. My aunt didn't say anything else about university that evening, or the next day, or the day after that. She's barely brought it up since, and when we saw her a few months later, she changed the subject the moment anything career-related came up. I met my boyfriend back in May through mutual friends. Things moved pretty fast between us. He's the kind of guy who likes the finer things in life. Nice restaurants, weekend trips, expensive concerts. I'm over here clipping coupons and bringing lunch from home to work every day. My small apartment takes most of my paycheck each month. I don't have much left over after rent, utilities, groceries, and my student loans. I've got maybe $1,000 in savings that I've been building up for emergencies. My boyfriend lives with his parents, rent-free. He's got a decent job and his income is basically all disposable. We'd argue about money constantly because he'd want to go out to fancy places or take spontaneous trips. I'd have to explain that I literally couldn't afford it. He'd get frustrated and say I was being cheap. I'd get frustrated because he didn't understand what it was like to actually have financial responsibilities. About a month into dating, he invited me to his friend's wedding. I'd never met her before, but he seemed excited about it, so I said yes. He bought plane tickets and booked a hotel room for us. The wedding was supposed to be in early November, so it seemed far away at the time. The months went on and the arguments about money got worse. He'd want me to split bills 50-50 on things that were way out of my budget. When I'd suggest cheaper alternatives, he'd act like I was ruining everything. I started to realize we just weren't compatible in some fundamental ways. It wasn't just the money thing. That was a symptom of us having completely different values and life situations. A few days ago I ended it. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. One thing I thought about was the wedding. I didn't want to be in all those photos at his friend's wedding, only for everyone to look back years from now and feel awkward seeing his ex-girlfriend in the pictures. I figured ending things now, was more than a month before the wedding, was better than waiting. I packed up all his stuff from my apartment, his toothbrush, some clothes he'd left, a couple books. I texted him to arrange a time to return everything. I also told him I wanted to do the right thing and pay him back for my plane ticket and half the hotel room. It came to about $420. That was my entire emergency fund, but I felt like it was the fair thing to do since he'd already spent that money and I was the one backing out. He came by to pick up his things. We didn't talk much. It was awkward but civil. Then today I got a text from him. He said he'd talked to his friend about the wedding situation. I asked him what she'd said. He told me she was upset because she'd already paid the deposit for my plate at the reception. The caterer had a deadline and they were past it. I apologized for the inconvenience but pointed out that there was still over a month until the wedding. I asked if she couldn't find someone else to fill the seat. He said that wasn't the point. She'd already paid for it. The vendors required deposits and they were non-refundable at this point. I reminded him that I'd given plenty of notice. More than a month was a lot of time. He countered that I'd confirmed my attendance when I said yes to the invitation. I'd made a commitment. Now his friend was out the money because I was backing out. I told him I'd already paid him back for the ticket and hotel, and I thought that was fair. He said that was for our expenses, but this was different. This was money his friend had spent on me specifically. The plate, the centerpiece, the favors. It all added up. She was asking for $125 to offset her costs. He wanted me to pay for a wedding reception I wasn't even attending. I told him I didn't think that was reasonable. People cancel on weddings all the time, it's just something that happens. He disagreed. He said it was too close to the wedding and not after I'd already confirmed. It was rude. I shot back that it was 5 weeks away, which wasn't close at all. And I wouldn't be paying that money if I was going, so why should I pay it now? He said my cancellation was causing his friend to lose money. I was being selfish about this. I felt my blood pressure rising. I told him I was being selfish when I'd just given him over $400 that I really couldn't afford. That was literally all of my savings. He could find another date who would benefit from the hotel room I'd already paid for. He went quiet for a minute, then he said his friend was really upset and had specifically asked him to request this money from me. It was only fair since she'd already paid the vendor. I told him that what wasn't fair was expecting me to pay for something I wasn't using. His friend had 5 weeks to adjust the head count or find a replacement guest. That was more than reasonable notice. He said I was being difficult and that this was exactly why we didn't work out. I couldn't understand basic social obligations. I replied that maybe he was right about us not working out, but my understanding of social obligations was just fine. What I didn't understand was why I should pay for a party I wasn't attending when I'd already emptied my savings account to reimburse him for travel expenses. He told me to think about it and let him know. Then he stopped responding. I'd already given him everything I had in savings. I was going to be living on an even tighter budget for the next few months while I built that back up, and now he wanted more. I decided I needed a second opinion. I called my sister and explained the whole situation. She listened quietly while I went through everything. When I finished, she asked me if I was seriously considering paying this. I admitted I felt guilty, even though I logically knew it wasn't reasonable. She told me I was being manipulated. I'd given more than a month's notice, which was plenty of time. People cancel on weddings. It happens. The bride and groom factor that's into their planning, and I'd already paid back my portion of the actual expenses I'd incurred. She said that if his friend was really that concerned about the money, she could easily find someone else to take my spot. She had 5 weeks, or my ex could bring a different date. The request for additional money was just vindictive. They were trying to punish me for ending the relationship. That perspective helped. I texted him back and told him I wouldn't be paying for the reception plate. I'd already reimbursed him for my actual expenses, and that was more than fair. If his friend needed someone to fill the seat, he had plenty of time to find another guest. He responded with a long message about how disappointed he was in me, and how this showed my true character. He said his friend was considering having her parents reach out to me directly. I told him that if anyone harassed me about this, I'd block them. Then I blocked his number. 2 days later, I got a friend request on social media from a woman I didn't know. Her profile picture showed her in a wedding dress. I realized it was the bride. I declined the request and set my profiles to private. She tried to message me anyway. The preview showed something about responsibility and respect. I deleted it without reading the full thing and blocked her too. A week went by. I was starting to feel better about the whole situation. Then my ex showed up at my apartment building. The doorman called up to ask if I wanted to let him in. I said no. He'd brought his friend with him. They wanted to talk to me in person about the money. I told the doorman I didn't want any visitors and to please ask them to leave. My ex tried calling from a different number. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail saying I was being immature and that avoiding the situation wouldn't make it go away. I saved the voicemail in case I needed evidence of harassment later, but I didn't respond. I decided to take a different approach. I looked up the venue where the wedding was being held and called them directly. I explained that I'd originally been invited but was no longer attending. I asked what their policy was for canceled guests. The event coordinator told me that if they received notice more than 2 weeks before the event, they could adjust the final head count without penalty. The couple would get a refund for any canceled plates when they paid their final bill after the wedding. So the bride was going to get her money back anyway. This whole thing was just about making me pay for breaking up with her friend. I screenshot the venue's cancellation policy from their website and texted it to my ex from a texting app. I told him his friend would be getting a refund, so there was no financial loss. Then I blocked that number too. I haven't heard from either of them since. I checked the bride's social media from a friend's account last week. The wedding happened. Everyone looked happy. There was no empty seat at the reception in any of the photos. They clearly had no trouble filling my spot. $420 was already more than I should have had to pay. I wasn't going to let entitled people bully me into giving them even more. A couple of years ago, my wife passed away from cancer. It was the hardest thing our family has ever been through. Our two kids were only 6 and 8 at the time, and watching them try to process losing their mom broke me in ways I didn't know were possible. The grief counselor said we needed to find ways to create new happy memories while still honoring her memory. My wife had always wanted to build a treehouse for the kids. She'd drawn up plans and everything, but we never got around to it before she got sick. So last summer, I decided to finally make it happen. I worked construction for 15 years before switching to project management, so I knew what I was doing. I hired a structural engineer to make sure the oak tree in our backyard could support it safely, got all the proper permits from the city, and spent 3 months building it with the kids. It wasn't just about the treehouse. It was about giving them something to look forward to, something to pour our energy into besides sadness. The treehouse sits in a massive oak tree at the back corner of our property, a good 30 feet from the fence line. It faces inward toward our house and the rest of our yard. There is no way it overlooks anyone else's property. I made absolutely sure of that. But my neighbor, this middle-aged woman who lives 2 houses down, lost her mind about it from day one. The first time she approached me, I was measuring lumber in the driveway. She came over and demanded to know what I thought I was doing. I explained that I was building a treehouse for my kids and that I had all the proper permits if she wanted to see them. She told me she didn't care about any permits and that the treehouse was going to invade her privacy. I pointed out that it was at the back of my yard and didn't face her property at all, and that her house wasn't even directly next to mine. She insisted she didn't care because she'd be able to see it from her upstairs window. She called it an eyesore and told me not to build it. I tried to stay calm and polite, but I wasn't about to let this woman dictate what I did on my own property, especially when it was something so important to my kids. I told her I appreciated her concern, but that I'd checked all the regulations and spoken with the other neighbors who were all fine with it. I said I was going to build it regardless. She stormed off. That should have been my first warning sign. Over the next few weeks, she called the city inspector 4 times trying to get the project shut down. Each time, the inspector came out, checked everything, and told me I was completely in compliance. She started leaving notes in my mailbox about property values and neighborhood aesthetics. She even tried to start a petition, but nobody would sign it because they all thought she was being ridiculous. When I finished the treehouse, the kids were ecstatic. It had a small deck, a rope ladder, and windows with real shutters. We hung some of their mom's old wind chimes up there. Watching them play in it, hearing them laugh again, made everything worth it. But she didn't stop. She'd stand in her yard and glare at it. She filed a complaint with the Homeowners Association, which we don't even have in this neighborhood. She threatened to sue me, though her lawyer apparently told her she had no case. Then, about 2 months ago, things got terrifying. I woke up around 2 in the morning to the most horrific screaming I've ever heard. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then I smelled smoke. I ran to the window and saw orange flames lighting up my backyard. I sprinted outside in my pajamas, and my heart just stopped. The treehouse was on fire, and there she was, rolling on the ground near the base of the tree, completely engulfed in flames from the waist down. There was a gas can lying on its side nearby, still pouring gasoline onto the grass. I grabbed the garden hose and sprayed her down first. I'm not proud of my first instinct, but I'm not a monster. The smell was awful. Once the flames on her were out, I turned the hose on the tree while calling emergency services on my phone. I told the operator that my neighbor had set my treehouse on fire and that she was badly burned. I said I needed firefighters and an ambulance immediately. The next 20 minutes were chaos. The fire department arrived and managed to save most of the tree and about half the treehouse. The ambulance took her away. Police started questioning me while firefighters were still working. The officer asked me to explain what had happened. I told him I'd woken up to screaming, and that when I looked outside she was on fire next to my treehouse. I pointed out the gas can lying there. I explained that she'd been harassing me for months about the treehouse, threatening me and trying to get it torn down through any means possible. The officer said they'd need to get my full statement. I showed them all the threatening notes, emails, the documentation of her repeated complaints to the city, everything. My doorbell camera had caught her walking into my yard carrying the gas can, though the angle didn't capture what happened next. Apparently, she'd poured gasoline all over the base of the tree and the treehouse supports. When she tried to light it, the vapors ignited faster than she expected, and the flames traveled back to her. She ended up with third-degree burns covering one entire leg and part of her torso. She spent 2 weeks in the hospital. When she got out, she was arrested. The evidence was overwhelming. Her own lawyer told her to take a plea deal. The prosecutor explained everything to me during the process. He said she was being charged with arson, criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and trespassing. He told me the arson alone carried a significant prison sentence, and that since my children were in the house while she did this, if the fire had spread, they'd be looking at much more serious charges. That thought kept me up at night. My kids were sleeping 20 feet away while she tried to burn down something they loved, something connected to their mother's memory. She ended up pleading guilty to avoid trial. The judge gave her 4 years in prison, plus she was ordered to pay for all the damages, the medical bills for my kids' therapy after the trauma of watching firefighters in our yard, the reconstruction of the treehouse, and the treatment for the tree. The insurance and restitution money came through about a month ago. I've already rebuilt the treehouse. It's even better than before. The kids helped again, and this time there was no angry neighbor watching from her yard. The house 2 doors down went up for sale shortly after the sentencing. A nice young couple bought it. When they asked about the treehouse, I just told them my kids loved playing in it. I didn't mention what happened. They didn't need to know. They complimented the craftsmanship and said their future kids would probably be jealous. My son is 10 now and my daughter is 12, and they still use the treehouse almost every day after school. I've been riding Amtrak for work. The routes aren't always perfect, but I've gotten used to the rhythm of train travel. You'll learn to pack light, bring your own snacks, and always have a backup plan because delays happen. Yesterday's trip was supposed to be straightforward. I had a morning departure, a 4-hour ride, then a connection to my final destination. Simple enough. About 2 hours into the journey, the train started slowing down more than usual. Then it stopped completely. The conductor came over the speaker system and explained that there had been an accident on the tracks ahead. Emergency services were handling it, but we needed to wait for them to clear everything before we could continue. The good news was that we had stopped at a station so people who needed to could make other arrangements. I looked at my watch. My connection was in 2 hours. If this delay went on too long, I'd miss it entirely. The station we were at wasn't close enough to my final destination to just rent a car and drive. I needed to stay on this train and hope it got moving soon enough for me to make my connection. All I could do was wait. The atmosphere in my car got loud pretty quickly. Everyone was on their phones, calling people to explain the situation, rearranging plans, complaining to whoever would listen. I understood it. People were frustrated and anxious, but the noise was starting to give me a headache, and I knew I'd be stuck here for who knows how long. The conductor made another announcement. She said there were seats available in the quiet car for anyone who wanted to move there. Then she clearly warned everyone that the quiet car has strict rules. No phone conversations, no loud talking. You couldn't speak above a whisper. If you needed to make a call, you had to go to a different car. I grabbed my bag and laptop and headed to the quiet car right away. It was only 2 cars away, and when I got there, the difference was incredible. It was so peaceful. A few people were reading, some had laptops out working, others were napping. This was exactly what I needed. I found an empty seat, got my things organized, and pulled out my tablet to catch up on some reading. The quiet was such a relief after the chaos of the other car. I could actually think clearly again. Maybe 20 minutes passed. Then I heard it. A woman's voice, not loud, but definitely above a whisper. She was on her phone having a full conversation. No earbuds, just talking into her phone like she was sitting in her living room. I looked over. She was a few rows ahead of me. I could see the signs posted around the car. They were everywhere. Big, clear signs that said this was the quiet car and listed all the rules. You literally couldn't miss them unless you were trying to. The conductor walked through after a few minutes. She stopped at the woman's row and told her she needed to stop talking on her phone or to move to another car. The woman nodded but kept talking on her phone anyway. The conductor moved on to check other things. 10 minutes later, the woman was still on her phone, still talking at normal volume, still completely ignoring the rules. The conductor came back through. This time she stopped and stayed put. She told the woman that she needed to end her call or move to a different car because this was the quiet car and phone calls weren't allowed. The woman barely looked up and told the conductor that they had said passengers could make alternate arrangements, so that's what she was doing. The conductor wasn't having it. She told the woman that she understood that, but phone calls couldn't be made in this car and she needed to move right now. Karen huffed and made a big show of telling whoever she was talking to that she had to go because the train staff was harassing her. She ended the call and started gathering her things with exaggerated, angry movements. The conductor just stood there, waiting and making sure she actually left. Karen was shooting dirty looks at everyone around her while she packed up. She made eye contact with me at one point and glared like I had personally wronged her. I just looked back at her calmly. I hadn't said a word to her or about her. She was mad at the situation she'd created for herself. What made it even more interesting was that she wasn't traveling alone. There was a man sitting a few rows behind her, and based on how they'd been talking earlier, when I first arrived, they were clearly together. But when she got up to leave, he didn't move. He just sat there with his book, not even looking up while she gathered all her bags. She walked past him on her way out of the car. He still didn't look up, didn't say anything, just kept reading like nothing was happening. She gave everyone one final dirty look before she left, like we were all terrible people for wanting peace and quiet in the designated quiet car. After she left, the car went back to being perfectly peaceful. The man who'd been traveling with her stayed put, still reading his book like nothing had happened. I wondered what their conversation would be like when they finally got off the train. Did he stay because he actually wanted quiet? Was he embarrassed by her behavior? Had they been arguing about something, and that's why she was on the phone in the first place? I'd never know, but it definitely made me curious. The delay ended up lasting another hour. When the train finally started moving again, I made my connection with 15 minutes to spare. The quiet car made all the difference in keeping my stress levels down during an already frustrating situation. My job is at a big box store, one of those places that sells everything from groceries to electronics. I show up on time, I don't call out unless I'm actually sick, and I know how to do pretty much every job in the store at this point. Stocking, cashiering, janitorial work, you name it. The thing about our store is that we have this massive walk-in freezer in the back. It's where we keep all the frozen goods before they go out on the floor. Working in there is brutal, especially during winter when the temperature difference between the freezer and the back room makes you feel like you're going to get frostbite. But someone's got to do it, and I don't mind the physical work. This new manager just transferred to our location about 2 weeks ago. I don't know what her deal is, but she's been on everyone's case about the smallest things. Uniform violations, break times being 30 seconds too long, that sort of thing. Most of us have just been keeping our heads down and waiting for her to chill out. Last Tuesday, I was in the back area doing some restocking. This part of the store is between the break room and the freezer, totally out of sight from any customers. It gets cold back there because of the freezer proximity, so I had my personal sweater on. Just a regular sweater, nothing crazy. I was planning to wear it for maybe 15 minutes while I organized some inventory, then take it off before heading back to the floor. The manager walked in and immediately zeroed in on me. She told me I needed to remove my sweater right away. I tried to explain that I was just wearing it while I was back here and would take it off before going back out where customers could see me. She cut me off and said she didn't care. She insisted it wasn't corporate approved and demanded I take it off immediately. I pushed back a little, mentioning that I wasn't even on the floor and it was cold back there. She wasn't having it. She repeated that the rules were the rules and told me to remove it right then. I stood there for a second, kind of stunned. I mean, I get that we have uniform policies, but this seemed excessive for something so minor. But whatever, I took off the sweater. When I was hanging it up, something clicked in my brain. If she wanted to be this strict about corporate approval, then fine. I could work with that. About an hour later, I got told to restock the freezer. This was going to be interesting. Normally, we have these thick jackets and insulated gloves that we use when working in the freezer. They're not part of our official uniform. They're just common sense safety gear that the store provides so we don't literally freeze while doing our jobs. But here's the thing I'd noticed when I actually read through our employee handbook last month out of boredom. Those jackets and gloves aren't technically corporate approved either. I went into the freezer wearing just my regular uniform shirt and started working. It was absolutely miserable. After about 5 minutes, my fingers started going numb. After 10 minutes, I was shivering so hard I could barely hold the boxes I was supposed to be stocking. So I came out to warm up. Then I went back in. 5 minutes later, I came out again. This went on for about 20 minutes. In and out, making almost no progress on the actual stocking because I kept having to leave to thaw out. The manager came over looking annoyed. She asked me what I was doing. I told her I was stocking the freezer, but mentioned it was pretty cold in there. She seemed confused and asked why I didn't just go grab a jacket and some gloves. I explained to her that if she actually read our employee book surrounding our uniform, those items were technically not corporate approved either. I watched her face go through about 5 different emotions. She opened her mouth, closed it, then just grumbled something and walked away. I went back to my freezing routine. About an hour and a half after that, she came looking for me again, and she looked irritated. She said she'd been trying to reach me over the communication system for the last 20 minutes and wanted to know why I wasn't responding. For context, we all wear these little earpiece radios so managers can reach us anywhere in the store. Super convenient. Also not corporate approved according to the handbook. I told her it was because those communication devices were actually not corporate approved, unfortunately. She stared at me and asked if I was really going to be this petty. I acted innocent and said I didn't know what she was talking about, that I was just following corporate standards like she'd asked. She couldn't really say anything. She'd been the one who insisted on strict adherence to what was corporate approved. I was just doing exactly what she asked. This continued for my entire 7-hour shift. Every single time she tried to use something that wasn't technically corporate approved to make the job easier or more efficient, I politely reminded her that I was just following the standards she'd set. The box cutters we use, not corporate approved. The step stools for reaching high shelves, not corporate approved. The hand trucks for moving heavy items, you guessed it. By the end of my shift, I'd accomplished maybe a quarter of what I normally would have, and I was exhausted from working in the most inefficient way possible. But it was worth it when the manager came up to me looking completely defeated. She told me she got it now and admitted she needed to know how to pick her battles. I agreed with her and said she absolutely did. She walked away and I clocked out. The next day, I came in wearing my sweater in the back area again. She walked right past me without saying a word. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.